Hey guys, Mr. Schisler here with your ed puzzle for this class period. Um, we are going to be looking at uh, chapter 6, sections 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3, again on ancient India. So as you're watching this, we will have just wrapped up our ancient India early civilization video. So this will give you some kind of reinforce what we just learned about. So remember, just as review, that India is sort of established when a group of people known as the Aryans migrate from the north down to the south of what is the subcontinent of India. Um, and for quite some time, that there were a series of different kingdoms that popped up in India, but none of them were really powerful or wealthy on a larger scale. And that changes beginning around 550 BC, when this king named Chandragupta Maurya becomes the king of Magadha around 325 BC. Um, So Chandragupta, as the book says here, conquered many of the other kingdoms and established an empire. Um, he united a good deal of India, and he did this by establishing a strong government that um, ruled with a lot of strength and that used different taxes to pay for a network of spies and an army. He ends up giving up the throne, and then about 30 years later, his grandson, who's named Ashoka, becomes king. And he's an interesting story because at first he has this reputation as being kind of a violent warrior, but eventually he decides to sort of change his ways and becomes very peaceful and committed to the principles of Buddhism. And remember, Buddhism is a lot of it is dealing with the idea of personal duty and personal honor and kind of finding a balance in the world and living the quote unquote good life, right? Like living a moral life. And his policies when he's leader have a lot to are revolving around Buddhism. As the book says here, these policies encouraged everyone to live good lives, and state officials monitored moral conduct, um, which might sound a little odd, like having the government kind of keeping track of who's doing what and who's living according to these laws. But again, that's kind of how most societies are built. And so, as we've seen throughout history and other times, Ashoka builds a lot of shrines and a lot of temples, and he donates to charity and builds hospitals and builds lots of road and uses trade, right? And one of the big things that he does that the book doesn't talk about, but that is talked about in our video, is his commitment to tolerance, right? And letting people sort of um, practice their religion and their lifestyle. Okay. So 2.2 is about the Gupta Empire. Um, and what I would, I guess, focus on here um, are some of the contributions of the empire. Now, one interesting thing is that most empires, when they conquer, when you conquer another king or when you conquer some land, you kind of rule over it in your way. You add your rules, you make people live life your way. But when the Guptas conquered a land, they would allow the conquered people and the conquered kings to continue to rule in exchange for obedience, right? So in exchange for those conquered kings not rising back up. And so that sort of policy created a long period of stability where there was a lot of trade, a lot of peace, and a lot of prosperity. And it ushers in what's called this golden age, which was overseen um, by Chandragupta II. And it was a time where a lot of emphasis was placed on poetry and writing plays, and they end up kind of copying these down in these spoken stories are copied down in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. And there was also a boom in painting and sculpting statues and building new temples. Um, all of these medical achievements. Um, you see here there was a guide to medicine, diet, exercise, and disease. Um, and again, because of their ability to trade and to move quickly and with ease, they're able to spread these ideas throughout much of the world. Okay. And again, so just looking at the map, excuse me, the Maurya Empire is comprised of this region. So most of the Indian subcontinent, rather, and the Gupta Empire is really this northern area, just south of the Himalayas and the Indus River. Okay. And then 2.3 is going to talk to us a little bit about the legacy of ancient India. Okay, so I'm just going to read this straight through. Two major religions had their origins in India, Hinduism and Buddhism. These religions remain important and influential in much of the modern world. Today, 4 out of 5 Indians are Hindu, which greatly affects the country's culture. Although the caste system is now officially illegal, some people still do observe certain practices according to caste. The idea of reincarnation is especially widespread. Ancient Sanskrit texts continue to teach ethics through stories, and millions of people in many countries practice Hinduism, including more than 2 million people in the US alone. A number of great leaders, including Mohandas Gandhi, have encouraged the Hindu and Buddhist principle of nonviolence. So Gandhi is not an ancient figure, right? He rose to prominence in the first half of the 1900s, but he is considered one of the great leaders of the 20th century, and many of his ideas come from these ancient principles of Hinduism and Buddhism. People throughout the world engage in nonviolence to protest injustice. So, again, Martin Luther King, for example, his principle of civil disobedience, which you may have heard about in other history or social studies classes, his idea of protesting things nonviolently. He took a lot of inspiration from Gandhi, who took a lot of inspiration from Hinduism and Buddhism. So there's that connection. Many vegetarians follow the Hindu and Buddhist principle of nonviolence toward animals. Today, around 1% of India's population is Buddhist. However, Buddhism thrives in countries such as Sri Lanka, Thailand, Vietnam, Japan, Korea, and China. Buddhism also has a following in Europe and in the United States. Regarding arts and science, so you've learned that religion influenced Indian writing. The Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita are popular around the world, which is true. Like you can find copies of those in pretty much any bookstore. Right? Religion also influenced Indian architecture, an influence that spread to other parts of the world. The Temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, a country in Asia, is considered one of the world's greatest architectural achievements. And this was largely inspired by Indian architecture. And we can find, and there's that temple, right? We find these examples like these all throughout Southeast Asia as well. Ancient India also contributed much to the fields of science and math. Indians were among the first to practice inoculation. Let's see if they can give us a definition of inoculation. Well, basically, inoculation is like it's a vaccine, right? Um, for example, if we're talking about smallpox, it means you take a small microscopic dose of smallpox and put it inside of yourself, right? Like with a shot or with nasal spray, and your body then will recognize that disease so that it can fight it off more easily. And by using inoculation, we've eliminated some diseases and have almost completely eliminated others. Finally, Indian mathematicians created the decimal system and numerals that we use today. They also developed the concept of zero, which is crucial to math and computing. Indian astronomers, scientists who study, so astronomers, of course, are scientists who study the sun, the moon, and the stars and the planets, accurately calculated the length of the solar year. They also asserted that Earth traveled around the sun and proved that the world was round 1,000 years before Columbus's voyage to America. Okay, so this is kind of a nice wrap up, right, of the legacies of ancient India. We have the idea of moral conduct, right, of living the quote unquote a good life, like being a decent person. Science, medicine, math. Let's see, and yeah, that is um, kind of the last of the chapter. I do want to go over this chart because I think this gives us a good idea of the caste system, right? So remember, the caste system is a system of what we would call social segregation, right? It says based on the job that you have and where you stand in society, you have certain rights. You can marry certain people, you can eat in certain places, you can you would have different political rights based on that. And so this is what the caste system breaks down into. At the top level, you have your priests and your scholars. Then you have your rulers and your warriors. Then what we would kind of call the middle class would be the merchants and the professionals. And then the bottom class, that pink level, would be your artisans, so like people who make things with their hands, day laborers and servants. And that's also, again, it's a gross example, but it's kind of the most striking example, I guess, would be the people who clean the sewage system and who clean the streets. They would be down at that bottom. Okay. So again, this system has become less rigid over time. There's more room for movement between the classes, but there is still very much a legacy of this caste system that is still present in modern day India. Um, Again, it's not as common as it was, but it is still relevant today. Okay. I just want to make sure there's nothing else that I wanted to go over in this passage. Give me one sec. Um, yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I think the big takeaway largely is that even though we study ancient Egypt and ancient Rome and ancient Israel more in school, ancient India does have a very lengthy and complex and impressive history with their contributions in a number of different ways. So, again, if you need to rewatch any section, you may. But other than that, I am going to pause my video right now.